When did you teach a toxic person a lesson they'll never forget? My landlord Rick thought he could intimidate anyone who complained about the falling apart apartment building on Elm Street. He was completely wrong about me. I'd been living in the rundown complex for 8 months, paying $1,200 for a studio apartment with broken heating, leaky pipes, and a front door that wouldn't lock properly. The building had 12 units and every single one had major problems. But Rick refused to fix anything substantial while still raising rent every chance he got, according to some mysterious schedule only he understood. When I called about the heat being out for a full week in February, he'd show up yelling about ungrateful tenants and how I should be thankful to have a roof over my head at all. He'd slam doors, throw tools around, and make sure everyone in the hallway heard him complaining loudly about how much money he was losing on repairs and entitled renters who didn't appreciate his generosity. The other tenants were genuinely terrified of him and his explosive outbursts. Mrs. Garcia from apartment 2B whispered that he'd threatened to start eviction proceedings when she asked about the black mold growing in her bathroom ceiling. Tony from downstairs said Rick had kept his entire security deposit, claiming damage that was already there when he moved in 6 months earlier. But I started noticing Rick's pattern of behavior was much stranger than just being your typical aggressive slumlord trying to avoid maintenance costs. He only showed up for so-called repairs between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. on weekdays when most working tenants were at their jobs. He always parked his black pickup truck around the corner instead of using the designated parking lot, and he carried this thick black leather folder everywhere that he guarded, like it contained government secrets or classified information. The real red flag came when I was working from home with the flu and saw him leaving apartment 3A through my window. The thing is, 3A had been completely empty for 3 months, according to everyone in the building. I'd personally watched the previous tenant move out with a U-Haul truck, and Rick claimed he was doing extensive renovations before finding new renters to fill the space. But there was never any construction noise, no workers coming or going, no materials being delivered, absolutely nothing that suggested actual renovation work was happening inside that unit. I started paying much closer attention to Rick's visits over the following weeks. Every Tuesday and Thursday, exact same routine. Without fail, park around the corner, black folder in hand, walk straight to 3A for exactly 2 hours. Then he'd leave looking satisfied and accomplished, sometimes making hushed phone calls as he walked back to his truck. One afternoon in March, I noticed he dropped something small near the bank of mailboxes in the lobby. A business card for a company called Metro Property Holdings with a downtown address I didn't recognize. I looked them up online immediately and found absolutely nothing. No website, no property listings, no business registration I could locate through any public records search. Last Tuesday, I decided to investigate further and followed Rick's routine carefully. I waited until he left for his usual mysterious 3A visit, then checked the mailbox area more thoroughly. Rick had been careless with that black leather folder, leaving several papers scattered underneath the mailbox unit where they'd apparently fallen without him noticing. What I read in those documents explained everything about Rick's strange schedule, his secretive visits, and why he was so aggressive about keeping tenants quiet and compliant. But it also gave me exactly what I needed to teach him a permanent lesson about what happens when you mess with the wrong person. I called the phone number printed on those papers yesterday morning and calmly asked to speak with Rick directly. When he answered, I told him I had some very interesting documents from Metro Property Holdings that I thought the City Housing Authority would absolutely love to review in detail. And that's when I heard the genuine panic creeping into his voice and realized my carefully planned revenge was about to work perfectly. What exactly did you find? Rick's voice trembles through the phone, all his usual aggression replaced by something I've never heard from him before. Genuine fear. I think you know exactly what I found, Rick, I reply, savoring the shift in power between us. The whole operation you're running through Metro Property Holdings, the one where you're renting out supposedly vacant apartments to people who can't get regular leases. There's a long pause on the line, just the sound of his breathing getting more ragged. Listen, he finally says, his voice dropping to a whisper. We should talk about this in person, not over the phone, so you can intimidate me like you did Mrs. Garcia, or steal from me like you did Tony? I don't think so. I hear keys jangling on his end of the line. I'm coming over right now. Don't do anything stupid before I get there. Like call the housing authority? I ask innocently. Or maybe the IRS, because those documents show you're collecting thousands in cash every month that I'm guessing isn't being reported anywhere official. The line goes dead. I check my watch. It's barely been 15 minutes when I hear the screech of tires outside. I peek through my blinds and see Rick's black pickup parked haphazardly across 2 spaces in the lot, not around the corner like usual. He's panicking, breaking his own careful patterns. I've laid the documents across my kitchen table. Rental agreements for apartment 3A showing 3 different families sharing the 2-bedroom unit, each paying $800 cash monthly for a portion of the space. Similar agreements for apartments 4B and 5A, both supposedly vacant for renovations according to what Rick told the building owner. My door shakes with his pounding. Open up! We need to talk! Now! I take a deep breath, center myself, and open the door. Rick pushes past me into my apartment, his face flushed red. The intimidating landlord act is back, but it's different now. Desperate. Unhinged. Where are they? He demands, scanning my apartment. His eyes lock onto the papers, spread across my table, and he lunges for them. I step between him and the table. I've already made copies, digital and physical, stored in multiple locations. Double. He stops, running a hand through his thinning hair. You don't understand what you're messing with. Actually, I understand perfectly, I say, picking up one of the documents. You're running an unlicensed boarding house inside this building. You're collecting cash from undocumented immigrants who can't get regular apartments because they don't have credit histories or proper ID. According to these records, you've got at least 15 people living in 3 vacant units. Rick's shoulders slump slightly. Look, I'm helping these people. They need somewhere to live. For triple what you could legally charge if you reported these units to the actual building owner, the papers show you're collecting over $7,000 a month just from these 3 apartments, Rick. Money that goes straight into your pocket while you tell us there's no budget to fix the heat or the locks or the plumbing. He changes tactics, his voice softening. What do you want? Money? I can make this worth your while. I want my apartment fixed. I want Mrs. Garcia's mold problem addressed. I want Tony's security deposit returned. Rick nods eagerly. Done. All of it. And I'll knock $300 off your rent. Permanently. I laugh. That's not going to cut it. These documents show you've been running this scheme for at least 2 years. That's a lot of money you've stolen from the building owner. They're a faceless corporation. They own 50 properties across 3 states. They don't care about this building, but they'd care about the revenue you're hiding from them. And the city would definitely care about the zoning violations and safety hazards of cramming multiple families into units with no fire inspections or proper exits. Rick's face hardens again. You think you've got it all figured out, don't you? These people I'm renting to, where do you think they'll go if this arrangement ends? Back to sleeping in cars or crowded shelters. Is that what you want? It's a manipulative tactic, but he's not entirely wrong. The housing crisis in this city is real, and the people in those units probably have few options. But that doesn't justify what he's doing. They deserve safe housing with working heat and secure doors, just like everyone else in this building. You're not some humanitarian, Rick. You're exploiting vulnerable people for profit while the rest of us live with broken everything because you claim there's no money for repairs. He paces my small apartment, looking increasingly cornered. What's your endgame here? What do you actually want? I want this building properly managed. I want the owner to know what's happening. I want legitimate leases for everyone living here, including the people you've hidden in those vacant units. Rick laughs bitterly. You have no idea how the real world works. The owner will just evict everyone in those units and raise all your rents to make up for the lost income once they find out. Maybe. Or maybe they'll fire you and hire someone who actually follows housing laws. I pick up my phone. So what's it going to be, Rick? Should I call them now? His face goes pale. Don't. Please. The word sounds foreign coming from him. I need time to figure this out. You've got 48 hours to come clean to the owner yourself, or I'm sending everything I have to them in the housing authority. He stares at me, calculating his options. And if I do, what then? Then I'll hold off on reporting you to the authorities. But only if the owner agrees to proper leases for everyone and commits to fixing the building issues. Rick nods slowly, defeat evident in every line of his body. I'll figure something out. As he heads toward the door, he stops and turns back. You know, I underestimated you. Thought you were just another pushover tenant I could intimidate. That was your first mistake, I reply. Don't make another one by thinking I won't follow through. After he leaves, I immediately call Mrs. Garcia and Tony, asking them to meet me in the lobby in 15 minutes. This isn't just my fight anymore. We're all in this together, and it's time they knew exactly what kind of operation Rick has been running right under our noses. I barely have time to collect my thoughts after Rick storms out when my phone buzzes. It's a text from him. 5K, cash to forget what you found. Final offer. I stare at the message, almost laughing at how predictable he is. Money is his solution to everything. I don't bother responding as I head down to meet Mrs. Garcia and Tony in the lobby. Mrs. Garcia arrives first, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, worry lines creasing her forehead. What's happening? You sounded urgent on the phone. Let's wait for Tony, I say, scanning the lobby to make sure Rick isn't lurking around. Tony shows up a minute later, his work boots still dusty from his construction job. This better be good. I'm missing the game. I lead them to the stairwell where we can talk privately. I found something about Rick, about what he's really doing in this building. I explain everything. The documents showing 3 families crammed into apartment 3A, the cash payments, the Metro Property Holdings front. Their expressions shift from confusion to shock to anger. That bastard, Tony mutters. He kept my entire security deposit claiming I damaged the floors while he's making thousands off these illegal units. Mrs. Garcia clutches her cardigan tighter. Those poor families. Living like that, afraid to complain about conditions because they could be reported. Rick just offered me $5,000 to keep quiet. I tell them, showing them the text. Tony whistles. That's serious money. Means he's making way more than that. I think we need to document everything, I say. Not just apartment 3A. If he's doing this in one unit, he's probably doing it in others. Mrs. Garcia nods. The second floor has 2 supposedly vacant units. I hear voices in 2D late at night, and someone is definitely living in 2F. I smell cooking from there every evening. 5th floor too, Tony adds. I was up there fixing my cousin's sink last month and saw people going in and out of 5C. Rick told everyone it was being renovated, but I never saw any construction materials. We spend the next 2 days gathering evidence. Mrs. Garcia, who everyone in the building trusts, talks to residents who confirm they've seen strangers with keys to supposedly empty units. Tony, with his construction knowledge, identifies 5 apartments that show signs of occupancy despite being listed as vacant. I compile everything into a detailed document, including floor plans showing where these units are located, timestamps of when people enter and leave, and copies of the original paperwork I found. On Friday morning, I'm heading out to work when Rick appears in the lobby, blocking my path. His usual smug expression is gone, replaced by barely contained rage. You think you're clever, don't you? He snarls. Getting other tenants involved, snooping around my building. Your building? I raise an eyebrow. I thought Metro Property Holdings owned it. His face flushes. You're violating your lease terms. Section 12 clearly states tenants can't interfere with management operations or harass other residents. Documenting illegal activity isn't harassment, Rick, and I'm not the one violating anything. He steps closer, lowering his voice. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I've been in this business for 20 years. People who cross me don't last long. Is that a threat? I pull out my phone and start recording. He backs up immediately. It's a statement of fact. I've got connections at every rental agency in this city. Good luck finding another apartment when I evict you. On what grounds? I'll find something. Everyone breaks some rule. Maybe I'll find a pet you're hiding, or claim you're disturbing neighbors with noise. It's my word against yours. After he storms off, I head to the public library instead of work. I call my boss, explain I have a personal emergency, and ask to work remotely for the day. Then I start researching everything I can find about Rick. It takes hours of searching through public records and court databases, but what I find makes my blood run cold. Richard Rick Dalton has been involved in 3 similar schemes in other cities. 2 years ago, he was charged with fraud an illegal subletting in Riverdale, but the case was dismissed when witnesses stopped cooperating. Before that, he operated under the name Metro Urban Properties in Westfield, collecting rent from undocumented families until a fire in one of his overcrowded units led to an investigation. I print everything, adding it to our growing file of evidence. When I get back to the building that evening, I find an eviction notice taped to my door. The reason listed: unauthorized gathering of tenant information and harassment of building management. My hands shake as I pull it down. Rick's moving faster than I expected. I immediately text Mrs. Garcia and Tony, who both confirm they received similar notices. He's panicking. Tony texts back, "This is good. Means we've got him scared." Mrs. Garcia calls me a few minutes later, her voice trembling. "My daughter says I should just move in with her. Maybe this isn't worth the trouble." That's exactly what Rick wants. I tell her. He's trying to scare us into backing down. These eviction notices won't hold up in court, but he's counting on us not knowing that. After calming her down, I call a tenant rights attorney I found online. The consultation is free, and the lawyer confirms what I suspected. Rick's eviction notices are retaliatory and likely unenforceable. She offers to represent all three of us for a reduced fee if we decide to fight this in court. That night, I can't sleep. I keep thinking about the families crammed into those apartments, afraid to complain, paying cash to a man who threatens to report them if they cause trouble. I think about Mrs. Garcia's black mold that Rick refuses to address, about Tony's stolen security deposit, about my own apartment with its leaky pipes and door that doesn't lock properly. Around midnight, my phone lights up with a text from an unknown number. "We know what you're doing. Stop or there will be consequences." I save the message as evidence, then block the number. Rick is getting desperate, which means we're on the right track. The next morning, I wake up to the sound of someone pounding on my door. I approach cautiously, looking through the peephole to see Tony standing there, looking excited. "You're not gonna believe this," he says when I open the door. "I was talking to my cousin who works for the city housing department. He says the actual owner of this building is coming for an inspection on Tuesday." Rick doesn't know yet. I feel a surge of hope. Tuesday? That's when Rick always visits apartment 3A. Tony grins. Exactly. Perfect timing to catch him in the act. We spend the weekend finalizing our evidence file, making sure every claim is documented and verified. On Monday, Rick makes another attempt, sliding an envelope under my door containing $5,000 in cash and a note. "Take the money and destroy the evidence." Final warning. I photograph the cash and note, add it to our file, and prepare for tomorrow's confrontation. Whatever happens next, Rick's days of exploiting vulnerable people in this building are numbered. The question now is how far he'll go to protect his scheme when backed into a corner. Tuesday arrives with a tension that feels like electricity in the air. I've barely slept, going over our plan again and again, making sure every document is in order, every piece of evidence secure. The file folder sitting on my kitchen table represents weeks of work, our collective effort to expose Rick's operation. I text Tony and Mrs. Garcia early. "Today's the day." Owner arriving around 11 am according to Tony's cousin. "Everyone ready?" Their responses come quickly. Mrs. Garcia sounds nervous but determined. "I'll be watching from my window." Tony is more direct. "Let's take this bastard down." At 9:45, I spot Rick's black pickup pulling around the corner, parking in his usual hidden spot instead of the main lot. He's early today, looking agitated as he hurries toward the building with his thick black leather folder clutched tightly under his arm. I duck behind my curtain when he glances up at my window. I give him 15 minutes to settle into his routine, then grab my evidence file and head downstairs. As I reach the second floor landing, Mrs. Garcia peeks out from her apartment. "Be careful," she whispers, pressing a small silver crucifix into my palm. For luck. The lobby is quiet when I arrive, but I don't have to wait long. At exactly 10:30, a sleek black Audi pulls into the parking lot, and a tall man in an expensive suit steps out, followed by a woman carrying a tablet. They scan the building with critical eyes before heading toward the entrance. I recognize the man immediately from the company website I'd researched. James Whitfield, CEO of the actual property management company that owns our building. Not Metro Holdings, but Whitfield Properties. I intercept them at the door. "Mr. Whitfield, I'm a tenant here. I think there's something you need to see before you meet with your building manager." He looks surprised but curious. "And you are someone who's been living with broken pipes, faulty locks, and no heat, while your manager pockets thousands in unreported cash every month." The woman beside him narrows her eyes. "These are serious allegations, with serious evidence to back them up," I reply, patting my folder. Mr. Whitfield studies me for a moment. "I was planning to surprise my manager with this inspection. Perhaps you should join us." We head inside just as Rick emerges from the stairwell. His face goes from annoyed to shocked to terrified in the span of seconds when he spots Mr. Whitfield. "Sir, I wasn't expecting you until next week," he stammers, trying to compose himself. "Clearly," Mr. Whitfield says coolly. "I decided an unannounced visit might give me a more accurate picture of how my properties are being managed." Rick's eyes dart to me, then to my folder, and I can almost see him calculating his options. "I was just checking on a maintenance issue in one of the vacant units," he says, recovering slightly. "Happy to show you around." "Before we do that," Mr. Whitfield says, "this tenant has some concerns they'd like to share." Rick's face hardens. "Sir, I should warn you that this particular tenant has been causing problems. They've been harassing other residents and interfering with management operations. In fact, I've already begun eviction proceedings." "Because I discovered your illegal rental scheme," I interrupt, opening my folder. "Mr. Whitfield, Rick has been renting out supposedly vacant apartments to undocumented immigrants for cash. He collects thousands of dollars monthly that never appear in your company's books." Rick's face flushes deep red. "That's absurd. This tenant is clearly delusional." I pull out the rental agreements I found in his folder. These show 3 families sharing apartment 3A, each paying $800 monthly in cash. I have similar documentation for units 2D, 2F, 5A, and 5C. All apartments you've told Mr. Whitfield are vacant and awaiting renovation. The woman with the tablet takes the documents, scanning them quickly. "These appear to be legitimate rental agreements, James, but they're not on our letterhead or in our system." Rick lunges toward me. "You had no right to go through my personal papers. That's theft. They fell out of your folder in the lobby," I say calmly. "And and I have witnesses who saw me pick them up. Mr. Whitfield's expression has gone from curious to thunderous. Rick, is this true? Have you been subletting vacant units without authorization? Sir, I can explain these people needed housing, and I was charging them triple what legal rent would be, I finish, while telling legitimate tenants there was no budget for essential repairs. By now, other residents have begun gathering in the lobby, drawn by the commotion. Tony arrives with perfect timing, carrying his own stack of photos. I've got pictures of all 5 illegal units, he announces, including timestamps of when people come and go. And Mrs. Garcia has records of every maintenance request Rick has ignored for the past year. Rick's composure completely shatters. You ungrateful pieces of shit, he shouts, jabbing a finger in my face. You think anyone else would rent to you for what you're paying? You think these illegals would have anywhere else to go? He takes a threatening step toward me. I should have thrown you out the minute you started asking questions. I'll make sure you never rent in this city again. His hand shoots out, grabbing my arm hard enough to leave marks. I don't flinch, just stare back at him. That's assault, Mr. Whitfield says quietly. On top of fraud, embezzlement, and what I suspect will be numerous code violations once we inspect these units. He nods to the woman beside him, who's already on her phone. Sarah, call building security and have them meet us here immediately. Rick releases my arm, backing away. You don't understand the housing market in this city. These people deserve safe, legal housing with working heat and secure locks, I say, echoing what I told Rick days earlier, not to be exploited because they're vulnerable. Mrs. Garcia appears at the stairwell door, her phone in hand. I recorded everything he just said, she announces proudly. The threats, the admission about the illegal units, all of it. Rick looks around wildly, like a cornered animal. For a terrifying moment, I think he might try to run, or worse, lash out physically again. But the fight seems to drain from him when 2 uniformed security guards enter from the parking lot. Rick Dalton, Mr. Whitfield says formally, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises and collect your keys and any company property. He turns to the guards. Mr. Dalton is no longer employed by Whitfield Properties. Please ensure he leaves the premises without further incident and doesn't remove anything from the building. Rick's face contorts with rage, but with security flanking him and tenants watching from every corner of the lobby, he has nowhere to go. You'll regret this, he mutters as the guards take his arms. All of you. As they lead him toward the door, he turns back one last time. Those people in the units, what happens to them now? You gonna throw them out on the street? It's the one question that's been weighing on me too, and I look to Mr. Whitfield for the answer. The property owner sighs heavily, running a hand through his hair. First, we need to assess the situation. If these units are overcrowded or unsafe, that's a liability issue we need to address. But I'm not in the business of making people homeless. He turns to the gathered tenants. I apologize for what you've all endured. It appears I've been far too hands-off with this property. He pauses, looking directly at me. Would you be willing to help us identify all the affected units and residents? We need to understand the full scope of the situation. As Rick is escorted to his black pickup truck, the security guards watching as he throws his leather folder onto the passenger seat and peels out of the parking lot, I feel the weight of the past few days lifting. There's still work to do. The families in those illegal units need protection, our maintenance issues need addressing, and we all need assurance this won't happen again. But watching Rick drive away, knowing he can't threaten or intimidate us anymore, I allow myself a moment of satisfaction. Sometimes standing up to bullies actually works. I'll help however I can, I tell Mr. Whitfield, closing my evidence folder. We all will. The next week feels like living in an entirely different building. A team of contractors has been swarming the hallways since Wednesday morning, tackling the maintenance issues we've been reporting for months. My apartment finally has a door that locks properly, and the persistent drip from my bathroom pipes has been silenced after an actual licensed plumber spent 3 hours replacing corroded sections. You wouldn't believe what was going on behind these walls, he told me, shaking his head as he showed me a piece of greenish pipe. This building was one major leak away from serious structural damage. Mr. Whitfield has been true to his word. The day after Rick's dramatic exit, he returned with representatives from Meridian Property Management, the company he'd hired to take over our building. Their lead manager, Alicia, spent hours meeting with each tenant, documenting every maintenance issue and addressing our concerns. We should have conducted proper oversight years ago, Mr. Whitfield admitted during our tenant meeting in the lobby. I trusted Rick because he kept costs down and never reported problems. Now I understand why. The most delicate situation involved the families living in the illegal units. Rather than evicting them, Mr. Whitfield offered them proper leases at reasonable rates, though some apartments needed to be reconfigured to comply with occupancy laws. These families deserve stability, he told us. And frankly, we need reliable tenants who care about this community. Mrs. Garcia calls me every morning with updates about the repairs in her apartment. The black mold in her bathroom ceiling has been completely removed, the affected drywall replaced, and proper ventilation installed to prevent future growth. They found water damage going back years, she tells me, her voice full of relief. The new manager said it could have made me very sick if it had continued. Tony got his security deposit back, plus interest. He used some of it to buy beer for our impromptu celebration in the courtyard last Friday, where tenants who had barely spoken before shared stories about Rick's intimidation tactics. He told me my cooking smells were violating the lease, one woman from the 4th floor revealed. Said he'd evict me if I didn't stop making ethnic food that bothered other tenants. He charged me $200 for a deep cleaning fee every 3 months, another tenant added. Said it was in the lease, but when I asked to see that clause, he'd always say he'd bring it next time. The stories continued, each one revealing how isolated Rick had kept us, making everyone believe they were the only ones experiencing problems. On Monday morning, exactly 1 week after Rick's firing, I'm heading out to work when I spot a familiar black pickup truck idling across the street. Rick is sitting behind the wheel, watching our building with a scowl that sends a chill down my spine despite the warm spring air. I text Tony immediately. Rick's outside watching the building. Black pickup across the street. His response comes quickly. On it. Calling security. I continue to my car, pretending not to notice Rick's truck, but keeping him in my peripheral vision. As I reach my car, I see him start his engine and slowly pull forward. For a terrifying moment, I think he might be following me, but instead he turns into our parking lot and heads toward the back entrance. I call Alicia, our new building manager, while walking quickly back toward the building. Rick just pulled into the back lot. I think he's trying to get inside. Stay where you are, she says firmly. Security is already on their way, and I've called the police. From a safe distance, I watch as Rick uses a key to open the back door, a key he was supposed to have surrendered when he was fired. He slips inside, looking furtively over his shoulder. Within minutes, 2 security guards emerge from the front entrance, moving quickly around the building. 5 minutes later, they reappear with Rick between them, his face contorted with rage as he struggles against their grip. A police cruiser pulls up just as they reach the parking lot. "You can't do this," Rick shouts, his voice carrying across the lot. "I built this place. These people would be nothing without me." The officers speak with the security guards, then place Rick in handcuffs while reading him his rights. I later learn from Alicia that he was caught trying to access the maintenance room, where he'd apparently been storing documents related to his illegal rental scheme. He had a storage locker filled with cash and fake IDs, she tells me that afternoon. The police found over $30,000 in cash and evidence of similar operations in 2 other buildings. The following weekend, we hold our first official tenant association meeting in the newly cleaned community room. 15 residents attend, including people from the formerly illegal units who are now legitimate tenants with proper leases. "We need to make sure nothing like this happens again," Tony says, standing at the front of the room. "We stayed isolated from each other, and that's how Rick controlled us." Mrs. Garcia, who's been elected our association secretary, nods in agreement. "We should have monthly meetings to discuss building issues and share information." By unanimous vote, they elect me as the tenant liaison with management, a position that comes with a 20% rent reduction as compensation for my time. My $1,200 studio now costs $960, still not cheap, but finally reasonable for what I'm getting. "You stood up when the rest of us were too afraid," Mrs. Garcia tells me after the meeting, squeezing my hand. "You gave us our home back." As I walk through the building that evening, I notice small changes everywhere: working light fixtures in the hallways, fresh paint covering years of scuffs and stains, secure locks on every door. But the biggest change isn't physical. It's in how people greet each other in the hallways now, stopping to chat instead of hurrying past with eyes downcast. Rick's black pickup is gone from our lives, along with his intimidation tactics and neglect. In its place is something I never expected to find in my rundown apartment building on Elm Street: a community. When Mr. Whitfield stops by our second tenant association meeting, he brings news that Rick has been charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and operating unlicensed housing facilities. The district attorney believes there may be more buildings involved, he tells us. They're asking any former tenants with information to come forward. I think about the documents I found that day under the mailboxes, how a single moment of curiosity led to uncovering years of exploitation. Sometimes the smallest actions can trigger the biggest changes. "We've learned our lesson about absentee management," Mr. Whitfield admits. "This building will have quarterly inspections from now on, and I'll personally review all maintenance requests." As he leaves, Tony raises his coffee mug in a toast to never having to wear 3 sweaters indoors during winter again. Everyone laughs and raises their mugs. "And to working locks," adds someone from the back. "To fair rents," calls another voice. "To neighbors who became friends," Mrs. Garcia says quietly beside me. I smile and raise my own mug to that. 8 months ago, I moved into a rundown apartment building with leaky pipes, a door that didn't lock properly, and a landlord who ruled through intimidation. Now I have a home, and that makes all the difference.